Magandang araw mga ka-aerial defense, may ibabahagi na naman ako sa inyo dahil ngayong araw na ito ay may bagay tayong pag-uusapan. Pilipinas maglalagay ng bagong Archipelagic Sea Lanes dahil sa ilegal na pagpasok ng Chinese warship sa ating bansa. Pero bago tayo magpatuloy, wag mo muna kalimutan mag-like, share, and subscribe. Paki-follow at like muna ng aming page na nasa description na ang link. Pinahayag ng Department of Foreign Affairs na malaki ang maitutulong ng pagtatalaga ng Archipelagic Sea Lanes para mapalakas ang ating claim sa mga pinag-aagawang teritoryo sa West Philippine Sea. Sa pagdinig sa Senado, sinabi ni Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo, na magiging basehan rin ito sakaling magkaroon ng anumang paglabag laban sa soberanya ng Pilipinas. Dagdag aniya itong legal basis para ipaglaban ang ating karapatan sa Exclusive Economic Zone ng Pilipinas. Sinabi rin ng opisyal kung sakaling maisabatas ang Archipelagic Sea Lanes ay malaki ang tsansa na suportahan tayo ng international community sa ating claims, kaya naman umaasa si Manalo na maipapasa na agad ang batas na ito para makatulong sa pagpapanatili ng kapayapaan at seguridad ng ating bansa. Maituturing rin aniya itong patutuo sa commitment ng Pilipinas na tuparin ang ating obligasyon sa United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea at iba pang international maritime rules. Minungkahi rin ng DFA na limitahan lang ang dami ng ASL sa 3 geographic coordinates, at bigyan ang Pangulo ng Bansa ng kapangyarihan na mag-authorize ng ASL sakaling may pangangailangan para dito.
Secretary Manalo, very basic, how can this law help improve or help assist in the assertion of our rights and sovereignty in light of the arbitral ruling? How can this law assist us in asserting our sovereignty and rights?
Thank you very much, Mr. Senator. I think on that, on the very general point, what this law will actually do, aside from clarifying exactly how we can, it would actually enable us to better implement the arbitral award by identifying more clearly the specific areas that we would consider to be lying within our sovereign rights. And I think, and we would have a stronger basis. Let's say, if any, for any incident, we would have specific, we'd have a specific law, for example, through the Archipelagic Sea Lanes, to help us further make a case that this, if there's any kind of infraction, this is definitely going against our sovereign rights because of this existence of this law. And then if we get the maritime zones law, and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes law, plus the arbitral award, plus UNCLOS, we would have a much stronger legal basis to defend and to actually assert our sovereign rights, especially in the EEZ, exclusive zone. And well, I think all of this put together will further strengthen our commitment to international law, and I think we will get more support from the international community, those countries who are definitely committed to maintaining and honoring the international law, especially maritime law. So this will essentially give us further basis to assert our rights in so many words.
Just a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, also basic question, so that our constituents will understand. I've been following the issue, and there's a lot of talk about enforcement, and the complication of enforcing the ruling, enforcing UNCLOS. And my concern is, even though we enact this law, will there be complications in terms of enforcement? And what are those complications? And how do we correct, if it's possible to correct or strengthen our enforcement of this law? So I remember before, and there was a lot of talk about how do we enforce, especially outside of our territorial waters when we cross our exclusive economic zone and the other areas. how do we enforce? Will this improve enforcement? And then how do we, assuming we pass this law, how do we enforce this law? What are the mechanisms that we can employ to enforce this law?
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Of course, that is a big challenge, but if I could just give my personal view on how this could best, if these laws are enacted, for example, the Archipelagic Sea Lanes law, and it has the blessing of the IMO, for example. Then we have our own maritime zone law, we have the arbitral award, and of course, we have UNCLOS. That would give us a basis to, let's say, institute measures to enforce our law. Because what I'm saying is, I think the laws itself will not guarantee the enforcement. But if we were to, for example, strengthen our maritime assets, for example, in enforcing the law, for example, the Coast Guard, the PCG, the BFAR, we would have a very strong basis now, stronger basis, to assert that what our enforcement agencies are doing lie well within our rights as given by the laws that we have passed. For example, the Archipelagic Sea Lanes law, the Maritime Zones law, and then the arbitral award. So that will give us so if our Coast Guard or our other agencies who are involved with enforcing or protecting our sovereignty, if they undertake any measures, we would have a very strong argument to say this is not arbitrary, this is based on law. I think, in my view, that's how it would work. But naturally, we would have to strengthen our capability to enforce whatever new laws we have as well as existing laws. So I think we have to go hand in hand with that. And for example, the DFA, we could make a much stronger case to the international community that if there are any incidents there which are challenged by another country but are in accordance with our laws, especially the national maritime zones law as well as the Archipelagic Sea Lanes, I think we would have also a much stronger basis for an argument and hopefully more support. So I think all of these can go together and strengthen our ability to protect our interests if we have at least these foundations to support whatever efforts. But as I said, this has to be a multitasking force, not just the law, but the ability to enforce the law. But with the law, we have a good basis to justify what we do.
I think you wanted to, Chair, with the permission of the Chairman.
Yusek Madriaga of the National Defense.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. Just to support the statement of the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs, but this time on the perspective of the Department of National Defense. And allow me to read this script, sir. Once again, and this perspective, we note that without the designation of the archipelagic sea lanes and the prescription of protective measures, powerful states would necessarily have the advantage of defining the right of passage in their own terms. A classic example of this, sir, is the Cebu to Passage incident in 2019, wherein a Chinese military vessel entered our archipelagic waters and loitered in the Sulu Sea. In reaction to the Philippines' public protests, the Chinese embassy released an article written by a Chinese lawyer, the pertinent portion of which may be relevant to the discussion of this subcommittee, and I quote, "Moreover, while it is a consequence of acquiring archipelagic status to designate archipelagic sea lanes passage, it has so far not submitted a proposal to the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, on the designation of archipelagic sea lanes passage. According to Article 53, Paragraph 12, if an archipelagic state does not designate sea lanes or air routes, the right of archipelagic sea lanes passage may be exercised through the routes normally used for international navigation. The Cebu to Passage is a deep channel about 18 miles wide connecting the Sulu Sea with the Sulawesi Sea. It is one of the 8 most important strait lying wholly within Philippine archipelagic water. It is an important transit route, international trade between Pacific and the Indian Ocean with an amount of around 15,000 annual ship passage. Thus, the Siputu Passage is a route normally used for international navigation that all the vessel can sail through as an archipelagic sea lane passage, including the Chinese warship. Some also accuse China of being double standard since it requires a foreign vessel to have prior authorization in its territorial sea. But the accusation makes no sense. China does not require foreign warship to apply for passage in its territorial sea according to the 1992 Law of Territorial Sea and Contiguous Zone. It did not notify the Philippine government simply because there is no requirement from the government. The DND maintains that the passage of the Chinese warship in 2019 is illegal and non-innocent. However, we simply wish to demonstrate that in this time of coercion and uncertainty, remaining ambiguous on passage of foreign vessel in archipelagic water is not favorable to our national security.
So Jan, I think Professor Beckman is raising his hand. Professor?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. I'd just like to make a couple of points because I cannot stay the whole morning. When you're looking at archipelagic sea lanes, there's two issues I think that are very important. One is it must be approved by the International Maritime Organization, and therefore you should talk to your government officials that attend the IMO meetings, particularly those that might have attended the meetings when Indonesia proposed its archipelagic sea lane. The second point I would like to make is the archipelagic sea lanes passage is an exception to the normal rules governing aircraft and military vessels in two ways. One, normally foreign aircraft cannot enter your airspace without your consent. But if it's an archipelagic sea lane, the foreign military aircraft can pass through your archipelago. Secondly, normally a submarine, if it is going to have innocent passage through your archipelagic waters or territorial sea, must surface and fly its flag. But if it's an archipelagic sea lane, it may pass in its normal mode. The normal mode, of course, is underwater, which means it is a serious threat to your national security. Therefore, in deciding and designating your archipelagic sea lanes, you should be thinking about what are the major routes where you are comfortable with foreign warplanes passing through your archipelago and submarines passing underwater. And therefore, I would suggest that you don't want 11 passage routes. You probably want a more minimum number, but you should then perhaps, my recommendation would be discuss these issues with states that have a serious interest in this issue, in particular the United States and Australia and probably Indonesia. I'd be happy to take any questions on those points.
Thank you, Professor. I think you just mentioned Yusek de la
Yes,
Vega.
yes, sir. Yes,
Patuloy pa yung tanong ni Senator
yes, sir.
Gatchalian.
Which I will add some more to the answers given to the Senator by the Secretary. How does it strengthen our case? Well, strictly, this is not related to the same topics or the same issues in the arbitral award, which were Scarborough Shoal and, of course, the West Philippine Sea, the islands and the rocks, and the features. However, UNCLOS mandates that an archipelagic state like the Philippines designate formally its archipelagic sea lanes passage. So we are strengthening UNCLOS. We are strengthening international recognition for the rules-based regime by actually performing our responsibilities under UNCLOS. So when we argue before China or other states that the rule of law should prevail, we have even more credibility, given how we are fully implementing UNCLOS. Now, on about whether China will object or the IMO will resist it. Well, one advantage where we could defend our sovereignty, and the DND was raising it, is that we are actually compelling other states, once it's approved by the IMO, to follow only the archipelagic sea lanes passage for foreign military vessels. Of course, foreign merchant vessels would have other rights to pass through essentially internal waters of the Philippines under other doctrines such as the right of innocent passage. Pero military ships only through the Archipelagic Sea Lanes passage. Now, anything is possible. Any state can object to it. But if they object to it, it should not be on the basis that they want to use more passages or the entire water. Because as opposed to the issue with Indonesia, they lacked an east to west route. We have complete routes, north to south, south to north, south to east. And we're limiting the area as has been indicated that we have to limit it because of the need to protect also our security issues. So since this bill, hopefully that will be passed, will not actually designate the coordinates, but the general description, we can work with IMO before the president designates the actual coordinates. The thing with Indonesia, what they receive are already the complete, the passage routes. So it was lacking, according to the IMO. In this case, we have the flexibility to follow what the IMO would inform us, because the president can do it, can revise whatever coordinates we submit. Because if they are fixed by law, then we'll need another, the passage of another law to change it. So it would take even longer. As for London, yes, we have the maritime attaché, but they all follow the one country team approach. So our ambassador is the head, and yes, certainly Ambassador Locsin will be part of the process.
Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up question to DND. Do I get it correct, Yusek Madriaga, that in the absence of this ESL law, the Archipelagic Sea Lanes law, other countries are designating those lanes on our behalf? And because of that, it's to our detriment that they are the ones designating and using it against us to a certain extent. Is that what's happening in practice right now?
Yes, sir. I would agree with your statement, sir. Without the designation of an archipelagic sea lanes, specifically for military aircraft and military foreign vessels, any foreign military vessels and aircraft can just pass through our internal waters or our archipelagic sea lanes, and they can have the excuse, just what the Chinese have said, that there are no designated sea lanes for us to pass, so they can enter any of our internal waters, like in San Bernardino Strait, in the Surigao Strait, and they can have that excuse that these are not designated as sea lanes. But if we designate as sea lanes, at least they would be obliged to follow that route and not loiter anywhere, wherever they want within our archipelagic sea lanes. But for commercial vessel, it's a different thing. They can pass to the established commercial international route, and they can invoke the innocent passage for commercial vessels. At least for a innocent passage, the Philippines has the authority to suspend that privilege for other vessels to pass through the innocent passage. So it is very important for defense planning perspective to designate a sea lane so that we can regulate the routes where foreign military vessels and aircraft can pass through our archipelagic waters. The archipelagic waters meaning those waters facing landward from our established baselines.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. I just heard Professor Beckman, because apparently, and again, I'm not an expert in maritime law or international law, but I gathered from Professor Beckman that it's not also all positives, no? Coming up with ESL, meaning military vessels from adversarial states can also use that, particularly, for example, submarines. No? So what are the risk in terms of when we approve this law, and what are the risks in terms of national security if ever we approve this law? And what should we put as safeguards in the law so that we can mitigate or eliminate those risks?
Firstly, sir, that's why the Department of National Defense, together as a collective position of the members of the National Task Force on West Philippine Sea, we are supporting only 3 designated archipelagic sea lanes compared to the original proposal of 11, because we objected for having archipelagic sea lanes designated along our what we call the Philippine heartland, which is the traditional invasion routes, which is Surigao Strait and San Bernardino Strait. So removing those proposed archipelagic sea lanes through those 2 strategic passages would enhance our security, and designating only 3 would allow us to monitor all the passages of the foreign vessel. Although, as what the professor have said, passages, innocent passages would require, let's say, vessels to be in their normal operating mode, meaning this. In the innocence passage, the submarine has to surface and show its flag. Compared to the archipelagic sea lanes, the submarine can operate on its normal mode. But since they're passing through established sea lanes, it would be easier for the defense establishment to monitor the passages of aircraft, surface vessel, and subsurface vessel passing through those archipelagic sea lanes.
From a layman, from a layman, you said when they pass, for example, we approve this law, and when they pass through our archipelagic sea lanes, do they also inform us or inform authorities whether it's a submarine or it's a frigate or a carrier? Do they have prior notice to the Philippines that they are passing through these archipelagic lanes?
There's no need for a prior permission to pass through.
Notice. Wala rin notice. So they can just,
There's no
like a
requirement,
submarine
sir.
can just
Yes, sir.
go through it.
And since we have a lot of straits and passages within our territory, so it would be very difficult to monitor all of them.
On the other side, since we don't have this, submarines are now passing through our waters without our knowledge. Is that a correct
That's a possibility,
theory?
sir. Yes, sir.
It's a possibility,
Yes, sir.
correct? Kasi wala tayo nito. So
Yes, sir.
more so that they can just go through anywhere. No?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Para sa mas madaming update tungkol sa ating defense, abangan lamang ang aking mga bagong video. Para naman sa mga gusto magpa-shoutout, mag-comment lamang po at share, paki-follow at like muna ng aming page na nasa description na ang link. Huwag mo na rin kalimutan mag-like, share, and subscribe. Pindutin mo na rin ang bell para updated kayo sa aking mga video. Maraming salamat po.